Let it go! All of you are shite! It's now not the Hobbit, but they will never stop fucking you. Aragorn! Aragorn! Oh. No. You know, he's over there. Frodo Baggins. He's my second cousin. Wants to move on his mother's son. Picks up!
May it be when darkness falls, your heart will be true. You walk a lonely road, oh how far you are from home.
Hello, my fellow YouTubers, subscribers, and Middle-earth fans. Welcome to today's movie review, where today I'm going to be reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, directed by Peter Jackson, released in 2001, and this is the first film of the critically acclaimed Lord of the Rings trilogy. As a lot of you may know, I recently re-reviewed the Hobbit trilogy because some of my opinions on the Hobbit had changed and my ratings had changed. And also the previous reviews of the Middle-earth films I did were 6 years old. So it was about time for an upgrade. And this is a series that I hold very close to my heart. I mean, I like the Hobbit trilogy for what it is. And I know the Hobbit trilogy has its share of detractors, and each to their own, that's fine. But you cannot deny Lord of the Rings is phenomenal. But before we go into why the first movie is phenomenal, let's go over the plot. The basic plot of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, is that it's an epic quest. There is an evil Dark Lord known as Sauron in the lands of Middle-earth. He has returned in the form of a sort of a lidless giant eyeball, and his life force is connected to this one ring which he created. And basically, the ring is discovered to be in the possession of Bilbo, who we saw in the Hobbit trilogy. Bilbo is getting older, and his psychological state has been affected by the ring. So Gandalf tells him he needs to let it go, Bilbo decides to leave, and then the ring is passed to his nephew, Frodo. And Frodo is basically called upon to be the ring bearer in this quest, in which 8 other companions join him to become the Fellowship of the Ring. And together, these people venture off to the land of Mordor, where the ring was created, in order to destroy it, because it is evil. This ring, basically, it corrupts anything it touches. If you are in possession of the ring, you are likely to struggle to resist it. Let's just say there's only a few people that can resist the ring. We did see the ring briefly in the Hobbit trilogy when Bilbo found it, but now it's fully much more important in this trilogy. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. All I have to say is, mwah! I adore this movie. This film is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's, you know, The Lord of the Rings is my favorite trilogy of all time, and this film is just a masterpiece. I mean, there is no denying the passion and the effort that went into making all 3 Lord of the Rings films, and I will touch on the next 2, don't worry. But as for the Fellowship of the Ring, I mean, this was the first time that people were going to see it. You know, we're going to see this world brought to life on screen. Jackson and his team brought the world of Middle-earth to life beautifully. It is fantastic. I mean, the level of detail and artistry in this movie is phenomenal. Like, the locations of the Shire, Rivendell, Moria, Amon Hen, it's all fantastic. I mean, it is visually stunning. It is one of the most aesthetically pleasing movies that you could ever watch. It looks so good. And again, a lot of the design and the effects are actually practical. They do use CGI in the film, don't get me wrong, but more in the background, more as a backdrop, whereas The Hobbit did kind of rely on the CGI a bit more. But The orcs actually are fantastic. The orcs are designed very well on a practical level, and they look so realistic. Everything looks real. You really do feel like you are in Middle-earth, and you're going on the quest with these characters. And, you know, the Lord of the Rings is famous for its complexities, but the film manages to be coherent enough for you to not be lost with the plot. I mean, this is only the first part. This is only the first third of the story, and there's quite a lot in this film. And obviously we've got 2 more films to go, but the film gives you the basic setup in the beginning. There's an opening prologue, which kind of gives you the basic gist of the backstory. It doesn't tell you, like, everything in masses and masses of detail like a book would, but it gives you the basic meat and potatoes of what you need to know. All you need to know is, you know, Sauron made the ring to rule all of Middle-earth. Sauron was defeated. Isildur had the ring. He lost the ring. Then it found its way to Gollum, and then Bilbo found the ring. So it kind of it just sets the scene for you, and it does it all in like 7 minutes. It's crazy how tight it really is. Because I think it would have been such a I think it would have been a bit of a drag for people to sit through a long, extensive prologue. I think the prologue is excellent, and it's also an exciting action scene. We get to see the Battle of the Last Alliance, who are trying to, like, the last army of men and elves who are trying to defeat Sauron in that battle. And they do, but at a cost. They obviously, they don't destroy the ring when they could have done. And I like the idea that the ring is actually a force of its own. The ring is almost a character. It's evil. It's tempting. Think of the Hobbit. It's like the gold in the Hobbit. It's like this force that corrupts people. It's just evil. It just draws you in, and it makes no apologies for that. And it wants to go back to Sauron. It calls back to Sauron. It calls back to everybody. The ring psychologically damages everyone. Well, the person it damages the most is Gollum, but I think we'll leave Gollum till the next review, because he's not really in this film that much. But we do hear that Gollum had a very long relationship with the ring, and the ring basically damaged him, in short. But we'll talk more about Gollum in the next review. And actually, the beginning of this film is really interesting, because we see Bilbo trying to get over his psychological addiction to the ring. Given that he's been living with the ring now for 60 years, if you look at the Hobbit trilogy, it actually means a bit more now. Watching the beginning of this film, you really do feel the emotional weight that is weighing on Bilbo. He doesn't really want the ring, Bilbo. He's just kind of weighed down by it, kind of like how Frodo ends up being in the later films. But I really did appreciate Ian Holm's performance, and by the way, rest in peace, Ian Holm. Very sad to hear about his passing. Very, very sad to hear about his passing. I think Ian Holm is a great Bilbo, and he's great in this film, and yeah, we really do see the ring unleash itself. There's even a moment when he's talking to Frodo, and he sees the ring on Frodo's neck, and he tries to grab it, and his face almost merges with Gollum. It's freaky. It's really freaky. So this ring is definitely a force of evil, and it really does infect everybody it touches. And even Gandalf resists the ring. He doesn't want it. He knows that if he has the ring, he is going to do uncalculable damage. So he says, Frodo, you got to keep the ring. I'm a wizard. I'm going to do terrible things with it. I know that I can resist. So there's only a few people that can resist. Aragorn can resist as well. But let's talk about some of the characters, because there's a lot of characters. So I apologise if this is going to be a long review, but I think it's earned. Okay, Frodo. Elijah Wood, who plays Frodo. Frodo, who is our central protagonist. I really like the guy. I think Elijah Wood's a good actor. I mean, obviously at this point he was a very young man, and he was obviously quite a looker, so that brought in a lot of the female audience. But he is actually a very good actor, and I like his accent. He's American, but he puts on one of the most convincing English accents I've ever heard in a film. He really is that good, and I think he's very underrated. I don't think anyone talks about him enough when it comes to these films. I think he really did. He's the emotional core of the story. I mean, he is the person who's carrying the ring. The only thing I'll say about his character is that Frodo isn't that good of a fighter. He's not very well trained in combat, but certainly on an emotional level, we do sympathise and empathise with Frodo. Well, we can't really empathise with him, but we can sympathise with him in terms of his emotional struggle with this ring. Like, he already regrets his decision to take the ring to Mordor, but it's too late. He's been called to do it, and he has to see it through. And then in the end, his struggle is realising, can I do this on my own, or do I have to do it with the group? He is told by Galadriel, one of the elf women, that you know, in the future, Boromir's going to take the ring, and all of them are going to start to take the ring. So I guess there was always the worry. So the Fellowship was already doomed from the start. So I guess Frodo just thought, well, I'm going to have to just leave and do it alone. But of course, not without good old Sam. Sam is just wonderful. Sam is a great character. The best of him is yet to come. Just you wait till Return of the King. But Sam is one of my favourite characters. He really is one of the true heroes of this story. He's so loyal to Frodo. He's his best friend, and he's always looking out for him. There's a scene in the extended edition of this film, because all my reviews are based on the extended cuts. Sam is looking after Frodo. He's like, you haven't eaten anything all day. You need to eat. You need to rest. You need to do this. So I guess he sort of mothers him in a way, but in a way that's caring and kind. He's not overly protective of him, but he is just doing his best to stick to his promise. Gandalf says, don't leave him. You know, stick to him. And I really like that. You really do see the loyalty come across on screen. Like at the very end of the film, Sam is trudging through the river to go onto the boat with him. And of course, Frodo pulls Sam up and he says, I made a promise. I will not leave you. I will help you till the very end. And their friendship is really sweet. I mean, it only, you know, we'll see some conflicts in the Two Towers and the Return of the King, but we'll get to those next time. Aragorn, yes, otherwise known as Strider. Yeah, Aragorn. He's actually the descendant of a royal line. He's destined to become the King of Men, which is the place where Boromir is from. Boromir's father is actually the steward of Gondor. We'll talk about him later, don't worry. But, so it's interesting to see that Boromir and Aragorn do have a bit of a conflict. But Aragorn he's also quite loyal, but he doesn't really want to be king. He's just kind of lost. He doesn't feel like that's where he belongs because he was raised in Rivendell. But he's a tracker, he's a good warrior, he's very protective of the hobbits. And he's also in love with Arwen, which is interesting. Arwen isn't really a vital character in the story. Well, okay, she is a vital character, but she doesn't appear very much. In the book, apparently, I haven't read the books, but apparently in the books, she actually doesn't take Frodo to Rivendell. In the film, they changed that to give her something else to do. They actually had her ride into the forest and meet Aragorn and the hobbits, and then she takes Frodo to Rivendell because Frodo gets stabbed. So they need to heal him. That's her best, obviously her best moment in the film. And then there's a couple of other moments. She has a love scene with Aragorn, and I mean she's probably the least developed character in the film, but that's kind of more because of the book. The book doesn't really give her that much, but in the Two Towers she does get a lot more development. But she isn't just the love interest. You know, she has a much more vital role to play in terms of where she stands with her people and where she stands with her father, where she stands with Aragorn. But in terms of this film, this is just really her introduction, so there's not much to say about her, but Liv Tyler gives a very beautiful performance. I mean, the performances across the board are so good. Ian McKellan as Gandalf. Gandalf is terrific. He's a fantastic character. He's this all-wise, all-knowing. He's a bit grumpy at times, but he's a very likeable wizard. He's very much a leader. He knows what he's doing. He knows what they have to do to stop the evil in the land, and he's a real support. He's a real companion, and he loves the hobbits. He just loves them. He thinks they're great, and it's nice to see him return. And there's even a nice reference to the Hobbit in there as well when he says, "Oh, if you're referring to the incident with the dragon, I was barely involved. All I did was give you a nudge out of the door." So he's got that big booming voice, and he often tells off the hobbits quite a lot, like Merry and Pippin, who are, in this film, they're basically the most mischievous little brats you could ever meet. But they both go on quite the journeys in the next two films. So, but I like in this film how we get to see them more childlike at first. They set off some fireworks at Bilbo's party, and then Pippin drives the orcs to them in Balin's tomb. So they both, Merry and Pippin, both kind of have a lot of growing up to do, and that's their place in the story. They are the children who need to grow up, and I like that very much. But Gandalf is fantastic as well, especially when he has that moment when he confronts the Balrog, which is this massive giant like fire monster in Moria, and he says, "You shall not pass." I mean, it is an epic scene. It is the most epic scene in this film, and it is probably would have been one of the most impressive things that you can ever see on the big screen. I'll have you know, I was lucky enough to see all three Lord of the Rings movies on the big screen recently. I was too young to see them when they came out, but recently, because of COVID and the lockdown, They only recently reopened the cinemas in July, and then a cinema that I knew was showing Lord of the Rings. It was a bit of a way out, but I managed to travel there with a friend, and we both saw all 3 movies over the course of a long weekend, so that was fantastic. I did a video about that if you want to know my thoughts on the experience, but in short, it was fantastic. That moment on the big screen was just, oh my god, it was incredible. There's so many moments in this film which are mind-blowing, like how did they do that? And even then, this movie has aged so well. Like I said, the visual effects and the CGI are incredible. Literally, they have held up so well since 2001. I watched the film on Blu-ray for the review today, and I was amazed how good it looks. It is so good. There is nothing... I mean, wow. I'm kind of lost for words, really. I also like Legolas and Gimli as well, the elf and the dwarf characters. I mean, in this film, I noticed watching it now, there's a lot of hints with the elven-dwarven rivalry. I mean, probably a lot of scenes which are in the extended edition, but we get to see the rivalry between elves and dwarves continued. Obviously, in The Hobbit, it was much more of a focus, particularly in the Battle of the Five Armies, but in this film, we certainly see some tension between Legolas and Gimli and how that will develop into a friendship when we get to the Two Towers and the Return of the King, I think is interesting. But it's nice to see that that's going to be developed. And when Gimli arrives in Lothlorien with everyone, and he says something nasty to Haldir in Dwarvish, and Aragorn says that's not so courteous. You know, Gimli doesn't he doesn't know how to hold his tongue, so to speak. He's very flippant, whereas Legolas is probably someone who's a bit more reserved. The elves don't necessarily remark the dwarves that much more. I mean, there's one moment when Elrond says, oh, you know, the dwarves, they won't help us, they don't care about, you know, they only care for riches and all that. So clearly the events of The Hobbit have had an impact on the way that elves view the dwarves and the dwarves view the elves, which I think is really interesting. But as I said, the Legolas and Gimli friendship will kind of cement the two factions in an alliance, in a way. Like it will certainly make them appreciate each other. But we'll talk more about that in the next review. I also like Cate Blanchett in the film as Galadriel. I mean, her role is quite brief as well. I mean, there aren't many female characters in the film, but she's one of them. She's very creepy at times. Like she's a very stern, sort of stoic woman, and she speaks telepathically to Frodo, and she tests him in terms of the ring. He tests her, I should say. He offers her the ring, and she refuses. She kind of unleashes a bit of her power, has a bit of a moment, and then withdraws in, and she's like, no, I passed the test. You need to go and get rid of this damn ring. And it's interesting. She kind of shows him what will happen if he doesn't do this. She shows him images of the Shire being destroyed and all the hobbits being used in a workhouse, and all his friends dead as well, all the Fellowship. He sees images of them as well. So there really are a lot of stakes to this story, which I really appreciate. I mean, this is an epic, unlike any other, and this is only the first part. This is just the start of the quest, but you can already see the kind of the gravity of the task weighing in on Frodo. I mean, the ring itself will start to weigh in on Frodo in the Two Towers, but in this film, he certainly can see the pressure he is under, and he already regrets his decision. But there's a lot of emotional beats to the film. The film is incredibly emotional. You can feel the passion in there. You can feel the emotion, and I mean, wow, it is just incredible. Howard Shore's soundtrack is just simply superb. I cannot put it into words how amazing the music is for this film. He created some fantastic music for the whole trilogy. I don't know which one's my favourite. Probably Return of the King score is my favourite, but all three complement each other so well. But the Fellowship of the Ring, you've got some great themes. I mean, the Shire, when we're introduced to the Shire in the beginning, Bilbo's delivering his narration about the Shire, we hear that lovely music, and it just makes you feel good, and then you hear the evil themes, and then the epic action adventure themes, and I can't talk musically. I'm not a music person. I don't understand music terms, but to me, it really fits this film so well, and it's beautiful. And the end title song as well by Enya, I love it. I think the May It Be song, I think it's beautiful. It really fits. It feels like it's an elf singing that song, and I think that was the kind of the idea they were going for, I suppose. The direction by Peter Jackson is incredible. I mean, this guy clearly loves the source material, and he clearly knows films. He clearly knows how to make a good film. The film is incredibly long, actually. When you look at it both ways, the theatrical cut is actually 3 hours long, whereas the extended edition is about 3.5 hours, like nearly 4 hours. It's a very long film, whichever way you look at it. But you know what? It doesn't feel long. It actually, well, okay, it feels long, but it doesn't feel too long. There is always something going on. The film maintains its consistent pace, even in some of the slow scenes, some of the more emotional scenes, which really do help. And again, this is only the first one. I mean, you're going to see so much more in the next two films. I know some people could argue, like a casual viewer might argue that all the stuff in the Shire does go on a bit too long, which I can understand, but at the same time, they had a lot to set up. And it was nice to see sort of the party of Bilbo and everything, and I think actually watching The Hobbit before this, it will mean a lot more, and you'll appreciate it a lot more. So, yeah, but I can understand if casual viewers wouldn't be interested. So I think if you're a casual viewer, perhaps stick to the theatrical cut just to see how you go, and then if you like it, stick to the extended edition. I think the extended edition is actually better for this film. To me, it just completes the story, and it really, all the added scenes really do help me fully understand some of the characters a bit more. I forgot to mention as well, Christopher Lee as Saruman. He's like the kind of the main villain as such. Well, he's working for Sauron. Because Sauron is a giant eye, he's not physically able to build his army and do all of that stuff. So Saruman has been turned over to the evil side. And if you have seen The Hobbit, you know that in the Hobbit trilogy, Saruman was good. But in the Battle of the Five Armies, he says, "Leave Sauron to me." So clearly, he's been lying to them for quite some time. So Saruman has betrayed the White Council and betrayed Middle Earth. So yeah, Christopher Lee is fantastic, and again, rest in peace. You know, he does a fantastic job. He actually knew Tolkien. I think he met Tolkien once, and he loves the books. He read the books. He was initially wanting to be Gandalf, but it turns out he actually he got Saruman. But he was happy to do it in the end, and he was really he was just excellent in the parts. Like I said, the orcs look fantastic, and the action sequences are terrific. Like, all the stuff in Moria is superb when they fight that massive cave troll, and then they run away from the Balrog. All of that is brilliant. The final climax in Amon Hen, when there's the big orc leader Lurtz, who fights Aragorn. That's a pretty brutal fight, and the fights are more grittier than The Hobbit, which I think is appropriate, because The Hobbit was initially written to be a children's book, whereas The Lord of the Rings is a lot darker and it is more complex. So I think the action is definitely more worthy to be gritty. Also, Aragorn, when he fights and burns the Nazgul on Weathertop, that's pretty great. The two wizards fighting as well, Gandalf and Saruman, when they fight, they have a pretty epic throwdown in the tower when Gandalf gets captured. Yes, okay, Gandalf escapes on the eagle, but again, I'm going to address the eagles at the very end. I might address it in my Return of the King review, because I'm sick of people complaining about the eagles, okay? You will hear my verdict on that later. And one last thing, I know this has been a lengthy review, one last thing I will say is that I really appreciate the script. I think that Brad Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Peter Jackson, when they wrote the script, they were dealing with quite a complex book. And this movie won 4 Oscars, and, you know, it really deserved them, as far as I'm concerned. The script is fantastic. It is absolutely brilliant. I can't say how true it is to the book because I haven't read the book, but from what people have told me, it is fantastic. And all the dialogue flows really well. You understand the story. It's coherent. It moves along. Yes, it is long, and when it ends, it's like to be continued in the Two Towers. So, yes. So, in short, The Fellowship of the Ring is outstanding. This is a magnificent film. This is one of my all-time favourite films. I absolutely adore it, and you know I'm going to give this film a 10 out of 10. Yep, I couldn't rate it any lower. Sorry. Actually, I know I'm not going to apologise for that. Why should I apologise for giving this film a 10 out of 10? Most people would. So, that is my review of The Fellowship of the Ring. I am so sorry about the length of this review. It did go on a bit, but there is a lot to talk about, and it's hard to condense it. It really is. So next time, I'm going to review The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. And as always, I'm Mr. TARDIS11. See you soon. Bye for now.